Rule 1. A simple control dart may be shifted from one position to another position without changing the fit of the final garment. Only the shape of the pattern has been changed.
My very favorite resources for pattern design all hail from the 1940s, and truly I couldn't state this golden rule of pattern manipulation any better than Harriet. In order to design fitted clothing out of woven fabrics, you must understand darts. So what are they, if I only had a nickel for every time I've been asked the question? The topic has become almost a special interest of mine. Not how to sew darts exactly, but how to explain them.
One of my most viewed videos ever is a 1-hour diatribe on just this topic alone, and today I will try and do it all again.
Why? A slightly different approach. Just like in maths class, if one explanation can make it finally click over the last, I will have fulfilled my destiny.
Paper and fabric are flat. They come to us in near 2 dimensions, laying smooth against the tabletop, ready for creation. The human body instead is curves, hollows, bumps, and bends. How then do we make a flat material fit around a 3-dimensional form? We use darts. Just the name for the little triangles of material folded away to mold that which is flat to that which is curved. In the case of the front bodice pattern, the darts shape the fabric into a cone. Yes, the front bodice is a cone. It may not look like it at first glance, but when we are working around a bust, we are trying to create a nice, soft, stylish cone.
Unless you're Jean-Paul Gaultier, in which case you are then making a cone, and usually for Madonna. Now this is where I must dip into math, as reluctant as I personally remain. In the pursuit of aha moments, I must at last finally devolve into some actual geometry, because I do think it could help some of you to understand what is actually happening here in the abstract. And like so many math problems, we get to begin with a silly metaphor, only this time instead of 2 trains leaving the station at the very same time, I need you to imagine that the bust is a party hat. Yes, a party hat. The regulars are already with me.
Each person with a bust to fit a garment around has a different size and shape of party hat, and a party hat is constructed as follows. The more I overlap the circle, the taller the resulting cone hat becomes. The depth of the cone is in direct relationship with the amount of overlap. You may have noticed the overlapping bits are wedge-shaped, a pie piece, near a triangle, a dart. The same principle applies to a party hat shaped like a bodice block. Now it doesn't matter to a party hat if you wear it with the seam in the front or the back, the shape stays the same. If the seam is on the top, the side, or the bottom, the same cone is created, and the same is true for darts on the bodice pattern. As long as the amount, percentage, pinch of degree taken away from the circle remains the same, the fit of the party hat remains the same. As long as the amount of dart fullness remains the same, the fit of the bodice front remains the same as well.
Say then, we could downright measure that angle then, couldn't we? Measure how much dart we need for our own individual perfect fit of party hat. Grab thee a protractor.
Each person needs a different amount of dart fullness, but it isn't a nameless phantom. It has a number, and for me, that number is 52 degrees. As long as the darts on my front bodice block add up to 52 degrees, the initial fit is maintained. I can split the degree in 2 as I do on my bodice blocks, and the fit remains the same. I can have 4 darts at 13 degrees, one at 30 degrees and another at 22. As long as the total dart fullness on my front bodice equals 52 degrees, the fit has not changed, even if the visual style has. While fitting a block, darts are not measured here, with the ruler along the seam. They are measured here. Dart fullness is not really a width, it is a degree, a ratio of the circle needed to create your own personal cone. I have been asked why there are not charts for how big of a dart you may need on average, but it's a question wrongly asked. A dart is not a measurement along the seam line, it is a degree of angle propagating from the apex. Plus, how far apart your dart legs need to be at the seam becomes a question of how far that seam is from the apex. So that measurement is essentially useless because it's not what we need to keep consistent. What we need to ensure the same fit is the degree, not a width.
I mention this only because I think it might help some people to understand what is happening when we use darts to shape the bodice, not because I ever actually pull out my protractor to check things during my daily drafting. Like I've said, I don't use much math in my work, even if it is always there. So I never considered that the angle that I pivot around all the time could actually be measured.
It's not something I need to know to manipulate my patterns into new designs. The fact that my dart fullness always adds up to the same 52 degrees is not something I pay attention to. It is something that happens as a function of drafting, not something I need to force on top of it. Knowing the angle that you require for your personal dart fullness is less something you need to know in design work and more something that would be useful if for some reason you lost your blocks and had to remake them. It would be nice to know what your degree was then, because then you wouldn't have to go through the rigmarole of finding it. And two, if a pattern has gone very wonkadoodle and the mock-ups are just not fitting you, you may be able to measure the dart fullness and see if something has gone haywire.
Now, I feel quite certain there must be some sort of a mathematical formula for finding the volume of a cone or creating a cone in a computer, but here at TCH, we do not concern ourselves with simulations. We must instead manipulate reality. And in reality, humans are too varied, asymmetrical, slouchy, imperfect for a one-size-fits-all formula to calculate personal dart fullness. That doesn't happen in a calculator. It happens in the fire. Fitting the bodice blocks is a battle, one fought with pins, persistence, serendipity, setbacks, minor miracles, and consistent courage. Perhaps enlist a friend. Your unique degree of dart fullness is not simply given. You must crawl over the coals and take it.
The tip of the party hat, the end of the cone, the apex of the bust. Darts must radiate from the apex, and even style lines, which we will get to, must pass through the apex if we intend to use them for controlling fit.
Or traditionally, advanced magic courses coming soon.
The apex is the highest point of the most prominent curve on the front torso of the body. Therefore, the fitting work is focused from this point. How do you find it?
Well, I always say that if you were to walk towards a wall, it's the bit of the bust that hits the wall before the rest of you. The tip of the party hat, as it were.
Rule 2. A dart may be placed in any position as long as it starts from a seam and points to the highest point of the curve being considered at that time. Darts must radiate from the apex, the tip of the cone. It is our pivot point.
We move darts to achieve a different design, not to achieve a different fit. As long as the degree of dart fullness remains the same, the cone created remains the same as well. So then why might we move a dart into the side, the shoulder, the center front? Because it looks a little bit different and variety is the spice of life. Or say we want to do something fun with a striped or printed fabric and the dart placement will affect that print in a different way. Or because maybe we're mimicking a vintage design and that's where they put it. Maybe your favorite dress up in your closet has shoulder darts and you like the way it looks on you. Where and when to move the darts is a design decision, not a fit one. The blocks fit you. Your new design will as well, as long as you're using that same dart fullness, that same block as a starting point. If you make something from your blocks and it no longer fits you in any way, shape, or form, something has gone disastrously wrong. Front bodice darts can be placed anywhere radiating from the apex, and only after you have moved your dart to the new desired position do you set that dart point back and draw in new dart legs for sewing. Because a dart is never sewn all the way to the apex unless you want a very conical result indeed.
The standard recommended distance out from the apex itself for sewn dart points, say in the Armstrong text, is 5/8 of an inch, which is nice, but as we know, no human is standard. This will require a bit of testing in the block fitting stage. General wisdom concludes that the larger the bust, the further from the exact apex one should place the dart points. Anywhere from 5/8 of an inch up to 2.5 inches is a far more generous general range. It will depend on the unique shape of the bust, the style of brassiere being worn, and personal taste too, just how far from the apex you will prefer your sewn darts to end. A very spherical foam cup bra will require backing the dart points off way more than, say, vintage instructions are expecting. The more cone-like the bra, the closer to the apex you can leave your dart points. That is why it is important to fit your patterns over the style of brassiere you intend to wear, because different bras force the bust into slightly different shapes. I mark my own dart points 1¼ inch away from my apex. I found this sweet spot only through trial and error, but I also wear the Bali brand flower style brassiere, and its shape leans much more on the slightly pointy vintage side of things. I would consider it kind of a soft bullet bra, not as structured as the vintage versions, but definitely a pre-mid-2000s, pre-Y2K shape overall. Certainly a different silhouette to modern bras or something even less structured like a bralette. So even my 1¼ inch away from the apex for my sewn dart points is on the pointier side of things. If I were to wear a more modern style, I would probably need to back my dart points even further away from the apex. Once you figure out this dart point distance while fitting the blocks, feel free to write it down on the pattern for future reference until it simply becomes second nature. We draw the dart legs directly to the apex for pattern manipulation. Once a new design is decided, only then will we draw in new proper dart legs for use during the actual sewing process instead. Drafting and sewing are different activities, and they require different manifestations of this very sacred geometry. As for beginning to move the darts themselves, I prefer what we call in drafting class the slash and spread method. Sounds violent, but I think it's a great technique not only for achieving the desired results, but for understanding what is happening with our pattern along the way. You can also simply pivot, which you may have seen me do in my A-line skirt video. But not every brain is going to be able to wrap around that nonsense, especially at the start. Let's begin with a bodice block with only one dart. All 52 degrees of the required pinch out to fit this block to me is sitting in one big dart from the waist up to the apex. There's nothing technically wrong with this, it would function perfectly fine, but if I wanted to add another dart, I would need to slash and spread. Because we cannot simply add another dart without taking some away from the first. The dart fullness must always be the same, 52 degrees, no matter how many darts I split it into. I cannot spread this new dart open until I first close up some of the initial one as well. You cannot create a new dart with nothing. You must split your dart fullness. You don't have to split it evenly, but you do have to split it. And yes, you can create a purely decorative dart for non-fitting purposes, for just fashion reasons, but no distractions just yet. We'll get to it. And thus, I have divided my own personal dart fullness into two. I can also put it into the so-called French dart, though I have recently heard from some French viewers that they don't actually call them that there. All darts are just darts, are simply ways to control fit fullness. No matter the angle of a dart, no matter to which European nation it claims pedigree, it functions the same way as long as it goes from the apex to a seam. Where a dart is placed is a design choice, not a fit consideration.
Yes, pedantic folks in the back, you get your own rant.
A woven fabric's grain line is engaged in different ways depending on not just the dart placement, but also where you line your pattern up on said fabric before you cut it out. But if the amount of grain line engaged by a different dart makes that much of a difference in the final fit of your bodice, the fabric you're using must be loosey-goosey enough that cutting it out is already likely to cause spontaneous combustion of the amygdala in frustration.
So personally, I don't even know how you got that far.
How open of a weave of textile are we talking here? Different darts will engage bias in different ways.
If that changes the fit super dramatically, you and I have a different definition of fit. And also, if you need anything to fit that damn closely, just work with knits. If I were to change where the darts fall on this particular dress, for example, they're in the side, but if they were in the shoulder or the waist instead, would this dress look any different to you here on camera? No. So don't at me. If you have an advanced understanding of grain line and working with bias, especially with different textiles, good for you. That's very like John Galliano levels of God tier. But I'm down here for the folks who are still asking why darts, not asking which stretches more on the bias, Georgette or Charmeuse. We can't all be V&A, and especially not at the start.
The length of a dart changes as we radiate around the apex, not because the degree of dart fullness changes, it's still 52 for me, but because the amount of distance to the seam, to the edge of the pattern does. That angle is the same no matter how long you let it propagate. Take, for example, the center front dart. Because the dart has less distance to travel from apex to the seam, the triangle is shorter and therefore feels wider somehow. It isn't. The degree of the angle is the same. It's an optical illusion. Do not be taken in. Darts can be combined, split into 16, moved all into one seam in an asymmetric cluster, but as long as the degree of dart fullness is the same, the fit will remain the same as well.
Now you may have noticed I like to reinforce that our party hat's shape doesn't change whether you wear the seam on the front, the back, or the side. That doesn't mean I don't think a party hat looks better when you wear the seam on the back. Ergo, just because I hammer home that where the darts are positioned on the bodice doesn't actually affect the fit of the cone we have created, that where they are is merely a design choice, that doesn't mean that that design decision doesn't have perceived consequences. This is the main reason why you prefer one dart placement over another. The cone isn't actually any different, but visually it almost is, because you have a subtle to not so subtle line laying on your body.
This, for example, is supposedly why French darts are extra special. The actual cone created is exactly the same as from any other dart placement, but the line along your side pointing upwards is supposed to visually lift the bust for that perky youthful illusion.
Where the darts are in a finished garment is a design choice, and that design choice does affect how you perceive the finished garment in the mirror.
The darts don't fit differently physically, and yet you can still prefer one placement over the other. These are design preferences. The actual cone has not changed. Also, using the dart fullness degree in different ways does start to, air quotes implied here, fit differently. Both of these bodices fit me, but one has far more ease left chilling to its own devices. Again, this was a design decision, and one you would make on purpose to achieve your intended results. All dart placements are going to create the same cone if they are sewn as darts. Once you start using them as tucks, gathers, etc., they will still fit, but will not produce the same fit. Again, refer to Drafting Dangerous Volume 4. The last foundational thing to know about darts is that we don't have to use them. They are just one way, the starting way of controlling the fullness, the amount of pinch-out needed on each body for the closest fit. If you instead want fullness, a looser area, leave the dart fullness right where you want it and don't bother to control it at all. I often use just half of my dart fullness and ignore the waist dart entirely when creating blouses and button-down shirts, for example. I'll sew a side or shoulder dart with about half of my needed fullness and leave the rest as just that, fullness, in the waist hanging below the bust. This is also how many so-called trapeze dresses or coats are designed, with just a bit of fit and a lot of flare.
It is important to know what degree of dart fullness you would need to fit your bodice close, so that you can decide from there what you would like to do. Knowledge is power, though sadly power rarely has knowledge. Ask me how I know.
Rule 3. Basic control darts in finished patterns may be shortened or made to end abruptly in a dart tuck to soften immediate curve area. A tip particularly apropos for those of you who just can't seem to get your dart points to stop puckering. Sewing the full dart is one way of controlling fit fullness, but in pattern design we can decide to use that same amount of degree in different ways when it comes time for sewing. For example, you do not have to have darts sewn closed. If you simply pinch out the needed amount at the seam line, the fit is created, but with a loose, floopy ease instead of a smooth, tailored finish. Using the dart fullness as tucks instead offers a different sort of visual interest. You can just leave the points of the darts unsewn, sew half of them or the whole thing. The results will vary depending on how well your fabric holds the ironed fullness in place. You may want things to stay structured, or you may want a design to look and feel as soft as possible. Like so much in design, it is up to your own personal desires and taste. Darts and tucks control fit fullness in the same general fashion, by pinching it away or at least folding most of it out of sight, but the same degree of fullness can also be used as gathering instead. One of my favorite personal ways to use dart fullness is as gathering up into the neckline. I show how to make this exact style in this video, but the basic idea is as follows. All of the dart fullness is moved into the neckline, increasing its measurement on paper, but during sewing the neckline is then gathered back down to the original measurement we started with, the same neckline as is determined on our starting blocks. The dart fullness is then hidden within this gathering, and the bodices still fit down to the body. I often get asked if this can work backwards. Can you find the darts from within some gathering? And my answer is no, because the answer is maybe. There are ways to add additional gathering while doing this too, extra gathering there for design reasons, not for fit reasons. And when working with a commercial pattern, you cannot know if they have added in that additional unfit fullness in there for effect. Variants of this are at play anytime you ask me if you can work backwards towards a block. You can't know what extra nonsense may have been done to a finished design pattern, which is why we work from blocks out to a new design, not from a design backwards to blocks. Gathering is just another way to use the dart fullness to control the fit. The degree of the control needed, the overlap needed to fit your cone, remains unchanged no matter how you choose to control it. And what about the darts everywhere else? All of these principles surrounding dart manipulation also apply to darts used on other areas of the body as well. The bust is the easiest example to explain because the apex is so prominent of a pivot point. In the same way we edge dart points back away from the tip of the apex for sewing, the high point of other raised curves around the body is ever less obvious. Where the pivot point for the shoulder or bum are is harder to spot and perhaps even more dependent on each individual's unique body shape. The back shoulder blade, the belly, the bum, and elbow, all raised curves require darts to make a cone of a kind, even if that cone is much less pointy and far more of a soft dome. I have already covered how you can move and play with skirt darts in Drafting Dangerous Volume 6, but those simple styles are only the beginning of how you can transform dart fullness on other areas of the body.
Actually, curved darts fit better.
No, curved darts fit differently. Unlike the perfect geometry of a cone, the actual body is all hollows and peaks. Once you know where you want your dart to be, only then can you further refine the fit and scoop out slivers of additional fullness. Or you can skim over it like a standard dart does. This again becomes a design decision that intermingles with fit considerations. Fit 1 and 2 see Drafting Dangerous Volume 4. A block pattern, a sloper, is all about having the simplest, most building block basic shell of a pattern possible. We do not curve darts on the basic block unless you intend to never move them again, and moving them around is how we use the blocks to create new designs. You can curve a dart, or a princess seam for that matter, to achieve a maximum close second skin fit. This is often called contouring and is especially important to consider in low or wide necklines, as well as in creating strapless bustier-type garments or super empire-waisted things. The angle of the cone will change if the cone is no longer going from collarbone to apex, but from further down. An additional pinch-out will be necessary, contouring to the exact shape of a person for the exact style in mind. How much pinch? Depends on your exact shape of collarbone, bust, diaphragm, etc. Contouring is a little bit of extra work, and at least at the start, certainly requires making mock-ups. Which is why you don't see me doing it, because I have never found it necessary for the kinds of clothing I make for myself. Though in fact, if you are a squishy person, like myself, you can even curve pattern pieces further, right into the body, and therefore change the way the body is shaped by securing it in rigid fabrics. That is how corsetry works. You can learn to use darts to make fabric fit the contours of the body, and you can also learn to make the body have to fit the contours of the fabric. This almost defines the difference between modern ready-to-wear and couture. Ready-to-wear slips on. More and more couture cinches, pads out, and conjures new shapes entirely. What is old ever becomes all that is new. Also, if you just mean you want the dart visually to look like a curve, that is different and super easy comparatively. I promise I will make a whole separate video all about curved darts, both types, you animals. And thus we arrive at the frequently asked questions. Can I cut a bodice with center front darts on a fold? No. The angle of dart fullness offsets the center front. It is no longer a straight line and therefore can no longer be cut on the fold. Though, interestingly, Harriet does mention the possibility of what she calls vertical center front control, where the dart fullness is pinched out along a center front neckline opening. But she also says, "It is seldom used in its simple form, such as the others, except in cases where the model is being made for an individual who has a flat bust and larger waistline in which the slopers would have much less area in the dart," aka best only attempted as a method for containing all of the dart fullness by those with only a small amount to work with. I'm going to guess this works best for those with 30 degrees or less of dart fullness in their sloper. I have certainly never tried it and didn't even know it was a thing until researching for this video. Can I manipulate the darts on my Victorian bodice pattern the same way? Maybe, but probably not. These are curved darts made to fit the corseted form. The pinch is too impure to swing somewhere else and expect equal results. If modern dress design fits a cone, Victorian dress design fits a hand-blown glass Christmas ornament. Some techniques are easily interchangeable. Many are not. Consult period-correct instruction manuals and make mock-ups. You can definitely extend the curved Victorian darts into princess seams, though, for color blocking purposes or other. Can I use this exact same dart manipulation hullabaloo with double-ended darts? Fisheye double-ended darts point to two different pivot points, the apex and the high point of the hip usually. It is in the name, double darts. It's actually two separate darts conjoined in the center, and this conjoining can only happen in specific hollows of the body. Just use a waist seam and usual darts, or wait for my video on double-ended darts coming later in the year. What if I have too much dart fullness? Or not enough? Note: women having extra large bust measurements or exceptionally small waistline for the normal bust would necessarily have a personal sloper providing abnormally large amount of control. If you have a bunch of dart fullness, you are going to want to split it into multiple darts if you are using simple darts in their natural form. When controlling dart fullness as gathering or pleats, you can get away with it all chilling in one seam, but putting everything in a single sewn dart makes it much harder to achieve a perfectly smooth result during sewing. A design featuring one single elegant little dart may work well on a 16-year-old runway model, but less so on a 34-year-old YouTuber. Because my dart fullness is 52 degrees, that's a lot of pinch to pack into one dart. The more difference built into the ratios of your measurements, difference between the bust and waist measurement, the higher the degree of dart fullness needed for proper fit, and the more likely it becomes designs will simply require splitting that fullness into 2 or more darts for the smoothest result, which makes drafting certain designs easier. And others have very little dart fullness, which equally grants other patterning privileges. Each has designs that are more naturally suited to assist with their fit. Work with what you've got, fudge things where you can, but also maybe stop trying to put a square peg into a round hole, if you know what I mean. What about exactly parallel darts, or more likely exactly parallel tucks, where the dart legs or tuck seams no longer seem to point directly towards the apex any longer? Well, like all things in design, it is a compromise. You can split dart fullness into 2 parallel tucks on the same seam line as follows, keeping your intended stitching line for the tuck parallel and then angling down to the apex properly. Using some dart fullness degree as tucks does give you an advantage when it comes to adding additional ease, meaning you can fudge things like, say, perfectly parallel tucks where otherwise there would be darts pointing directly towards the apex. What if I just don't like darts? Visually, or do you just dread sewing them? The first I can help you with. The second is because you're new to it. I have sewn thousands of darts. Practice makes that which first feels persnickety pivot perfectly perfunctory instead. Finding the exact degree of dart fullness you need for fitting your own body is step 1. If you choose to only ever use that dart fullness as gathering, as a seam line hidden within some other design element, that's fine, but it is still dart fullness either way. I try to focus on explaining why darts, not how to sew darts, because there is already a bunch of information out there about how to sew darts, top tips for sewing perfect darts, etc. I will say if you really struggle with sewing darts or getting perfectly smooth darts, I expect there are 1 or more of these 3 culprits possibly in play. A. You are using a commercial pattern, and possibly at this point, one graded via algorithm or an AI prompt and not by a person who understands what it means to be a human wearing clothes. Return to Drafting Dangerous Volume 1 and draft a block pattern that actually fits your own unique body. B. Your fabric choice is what is giving you 70% of the grief. If you are using a quilting cotton to make apparel, and I get it, the prints are very cute, that does go up to 80% though. C. Your dart fullness degree is above 40% and yet you are still putting it all into one dart. All of my resources seem to agree. The higher the ratio, the more you are just going to want to split that into more than one dart and or area of control. You can even gather some into the side seam, for example, which can be pretty unnoticeable even for me with all 52 degrees in there. So it would be an easy spot to hide some fit fullness if you are downright determined to only have one dart in a design. A concession will need to be made. You can either have one very large dart that is extremely hard to get perfectly smooth during the sewing stage, or you can simply control that fullness in multiple darts or other ways of control. What about knits? Yes, that's a whole different ballgame. Introducing stretch into the mix changes things, of course it does. Knits are almost like paint. Whatever shape the body is beneath them is going to dictate how the fabric forms around it. Wovens need to be shaped to fit the body more manually by the pattern maker, the sewer. Knits will sort of do it themselves. A different beast, and one which sadly rarely interests me, so alas, you must seek out another mage more suited to the goals of your quest.
So how do you draft a design with no visible darts? Well, first you have to find them because they are there, they've just made them secret.
The reason we all need to understand darts, even if you never intend on keeping them in your own finished designs, is because in order to replicate various styles, you need to know how they are being fit.
Dart fullness is at play, even if it has been transformed and controlled in some other way. You need to put your investigative hat on. After a while, you learn to sort of read in between the lines of any given design.
So often I get requests on how to draft something where the style lines maybe say don't go through the apex. And it's because that's all it is, a style line, not a princess seam controlling fit. It's there for style reasons alone. And the dart fullness is all controlled in, say, some gathering somewhere else instead. The darts are still there, they are just secret until you learn how to employ your drafting X-ray vision. Which is why I have tried over the years in my projects, demos, heck even during cataloging catalogs, to show you where the dart fullness has been used, hidden, controlled, and transformed. I want you to get your eye in. That way you can copy or conceive of any design you may desire.
Do not fear the dart. The dart is there to help you, and so am I. I will be further covering the details of various designs, torso-length blocks with double-ended darts, princess seams, and more here on Drafting Dangerous as we continue. My true task remains training you up to self-sufficiency. Still, come back and hang out and all, but my goal with Drafting Dangerous is to teach you how to fish all on your own. Well, look who finally showed up for work today.
Oh, where you been, Sleepy?
Thank you as always for watching today, and a huge thank you to my patrons who make my work and these videos possible.
And an extra special thank you to Alicia, AM Person, Amy, Ashanti, Audra, Bethany, Kat, Catherine, Concetta, Karina, Denise, Diana, Elizabeth, Ellen, Alona, Eloquent Silence, Eric, Fatal But Not Serious, Franzi, Haley, Hesufina, Jambonium, Janet, Jenny, Lainey, Laura, Lynn H, Lynn O, Mac, Maggie, Marie, Megan, Melody, Myrna, Michelle, Mo, Natalie, Nina, Paula, Rachamus, Sarah, Sarah B, Sarah F, Sean, Stephanie, Susie, Isabel, Thea, Tiffany, and Ula. And thank you to all of my patrons. Truly, I could not continue to do what I do without your help. This channel and my work are 100% fan-funded and almost entirely through Patreon support, so thank you.